not come up yet. So now to make this all work, there are 3 different types of business models that we are looking at in our case, and it's pretty much the classic systems. One is the island off-grid system, where productive use becomes center. Without productive use, the island system to electrify rural areas, for example, whether that's on a farm, in a community, or in a village, the productive use becomes extremely important because that is your means to generate income, well, for yourselves and for the business or businesses, but also, of course, for maintenance, repair, and future expansion. The second model does not require any productive use, if you like, and that is a system whereby you basically produce your electricity, but you're not using it. So you provide your land, the solar system is being installed, you might be able, if it's a agri-PV system, to farm underneath, but the electricity goes essentially in the net, and then the grid or operator reimburses you by whatever you have produced. The third one is a hybrid system whereby you produce the electricity for yourself, and whenever you are in excess, you're exporting to the grid at nighttime and other days where there is low solar generation, you just abstracting from the net. So that is where your productive use of energy, the PUE, becomes medium to high importance, because you also want to generate from your productive use. Thank you. So now we'll present just a few impressions from our piloting project in Namibia. The first one is our collaboration with the University of Namibia. It's a fairly big sized field. You can see on the top left, it's what we call a checkerboard. So the panels are arranged in a way where you have one open space, one panel. Then further down, you have east-west oriented, permanently mounted ones, and also tracking systems. So we are checking different types of systems and different types of panels and different types of crops to determine, or that's actually the work from the colleagues of the university, to determine under which conditions which crops are performing the best. And we have been through the tomatoes and potatoes, and I think currently the colleagues are planting the sweet potatoes for the 3rd cultivation cycle. Then we are also working and testing these systems for smallholder sites. The challenge here is usually that the actual electricity consumption for smallholder farmers is relatively low. But it is already powering cooling facilities, for example, or basic processing equipment. But essentially, you hardly go above 30 to 40 kilowatt peak in terms of the need. There is, of course, expansion and possible, especially if farmers come together and require bigger and larger facilities. But those are 2 sites where we're also testing differently arranged panels. And again, it's to experiment and research together with the farmers which kind of crops and which kind of arrangement. So this is now, as you can see, a different setup is doing best. While the electricity is obviously then being used for cooling, but also for pumping, for irrigation, and for charging equipment and different other uses. So the point that I wanted to highlight from our experience, and that is coming back also to the topic, is that the productive use is the very foundation of sustainability. It's the key to financing because it does allow you to generate income to pay back if it's loan-based or to expand. And it's really the trigger that transforms basic energy infrastructure into development infrastructure, and that thereby pushing development in various sectors, productive sectors forward. This is my little setting the scene. I hope I have done justice, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tino. Another round of applause. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I think the scene has been well set. What I took from it and I would like for us to reflect on is that productive use of energy for growth. And it follows three pillars. People, because in many cases that's the last pillar point that's mentioned, so people are important. Then food, and last but not least, energy. And if you remember your high school science, no energy, no. Guys, it's after lunch. Come on, let's do this. I could have got you to do the dance and whatever it is, but I'm just asking one question. No energy, no? I can bet all of you are here on holiday. That's why you can't say the word work. Okay, no energy, no work. So with this, I would like to introduce our panelists for today that will help us to unpack this further so you don't have to listen to me anymore. Engineer Tinyashe Mutazu, and I hope I got the gentleman's name right. There he comes. Yes, round of applause. You've got to do one for him as well, because that was just for me getting the name right. Okay. Engineer, welcome. Thank you. Next is Ms. Monashe, the principal climate change scientist. I'm not going to murder her name. She knows I know her and who I'm referring to, from the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife, Zimbabwe. That's it. Thank you. There is a disadvantage to having Jamaican parents, eh? That was a joke. Jesus. And Mrs. Felicia Makumbinde, Acting Chief Executive Officer, Rural Electrification Fund, Zimbabwe, will join us here. Round of applause. Dr. Wale Aboyade, Head of Public Policy and Government Relations, Sun King. Another round of applause, please, while he joins us. Don't you feel better? Aren't you waking up? I guess not. Okay. Ms. Helen Zulu, Managing Director, Zambia, Regional Director, Southern Africa for Ignite Energy Access. Round of applause, please. And I get to say the famous speech, last but not least, Miss Dina Razaf. She's going to help me with this when she gets here. Come on, round of applause for Miss Dina. Come on. Please say your name for them so that they can harass you.
Dina Razaf Matat.
There you go. And I can tell you, she practiced it all day, eh? Okay, no, on a very serious note, so we are going to kick off by, as I said, looking deeper into the issues around productive use of energy. And I always use these opportunities to pretend I'm still in the classroom. And yes, I was a naughty student. Sorry, I was actually a teacher. But that's another story for another day. And so we will start to ask ourselves, when we discuss productive use of energy, does that include my Netflix package? Does it? Okay. People that are more intelligent than me will then deal with the same issues. So, Engineer Matazu, I would like to start with you first, and that is because you came up here first. So they say first in, last out. Okay, all right. So energy cost is a major barrier for food production, while renewables have shown versatility and cost benefits. Do you see greater application approaches for renewable energy in food production? And you may use the mics beside you. You just press the button. If not, there we go.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and allow me to first acknowledge
perhaps the presence of our honorable ministers, our partners, and delegates to this very important conference. To also thank you for giving me the opportunity to engage in this very important discourse of powering communities insofar as the productive use of energy is concerned. Let me just go straight into the subject and to say renewable energy is increasingly becoming a strategic production input and not only an energy solution. And the greatest impact comes when we use renewable energy around rural agro-enterprising models. And here in Zimbabwe, we have something that we have dubbed the village business unit. Here, we see shared infrastructure costs being reduced and improvement on the utilization of energy. But perhaps let me just step a little bit back and describe what we call a village business unit. And by the way, I come from a agriculture, water, irrigation development, and mechanization background. So the infrastructure that we are calling a village business unit is a rural production hub which integrates irrigation production, shared water infrastructure for water supply, that's drinking water, stock watering, and then you have renewable power irrigation systems where we are using solar and drip irrigation. We also have fisheries developed around that together with livestock elements. And that particular unit is cooperatively managed around communities who come together as an aggregation production unit and are anchored by government to access markets through a state-owned enterprise of government, which is the Agricultural Marketing Authority. So we see these village business units as indeed renewable energy anchors, and the government of Zimbabwe has set itself to do some 35,000 such dotted throughout the country, which is like the number of villages, rural villages Zimbabwe has. These VBUs, as we call them, create economies of scale as they aggregate demand from farmers, the fishermen that work there, and of course the rural enterprises. And the renewable energy that we talk to here also powers the irrigation and the pumping that goes with it. Agro-processing, as already has been alluded to earlier on, together with the fish processing that takes place or is supposed to take place at site. So we see this as helping to lower the cost and of course strengthening value chains. This to us is really the water, food, energy nexus in practice. So we see renewable energy as supporting solar and hybrid pumping systems, smart irrigation development as well, and aquaculture aeration in some instances. The government has also taken it upon itself to integrate hydropower installations, especially at dams that are being constructed at the moment. But even then, we have also been retrofitting in long constructed dams, and we have created a reliable baseload for energy for the nearby agricultural activities and the fisheries for community development. We see this as a decentralized systems in food production. These solar mini hydros have helped power agro-processing clusters and have reduced dependency on diesel production. Hybrid renewable systems, as we see them, have also improved storage reliability for, say, activities such as refrigeration and irrigation. We have taken a step further as a government to come up with projects around floating solar on reservoirs. And this, as we all know, does reduce evaporation and at the same time generating energy, which again is used for irrigation development and fisheries. So there will be element of commercial fisheries, there will be element of cooperative fishing and communal fisheries. Sorry, community fisheries. And from where we stand, we see this renewable energy component strengthening commercial aquaculture and cooperative facilities as well. And to just give a real example, here in Zimbabwe, the government of Zimbabwe has engaged a private sector participation where floating solar development is taking place at Kariba, and we are at a very advanced stage of bringing this project to finality. And with financial close just about done now, we expect generation of an additional 650 megawatts into the system. And this definitely will enhance our energy processing. Just by way of rounding up in terms of policy direction, we think renewable energy becomes more affordable when it is linked directly to income generating agricultural activities and integrated into water and agriculture planning right from the onset. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Mutazu. I think here we have moved clearly into the three pillars: people, food, and energy. And with that, with the mention that was made about diesel, because of course once you have the discussion around renewable energy and there's a mention of diesel, I think it would only be fair that we have that climate change conversation. So with that, I will ask Menashe, what roles do the productive use of energy bring to climate adaptation and, of course, gender inclusion? Because that is also an area we should look at. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and good afternoon, colleagues. Allow me to write on the already existing protocols which have been observed. With regards to productive use of energy, especially in the climate change space, I think it's really pertinent for me to highlight that when we're speaking of productive use of energy within the climate change space, we're really looking at the nexus between mitigation and adaptation interventions. By mitigation, we mean activities or interventions that aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, specifically within the energy sector, and ultimately paving a way for enhanced adaptive capacity and ultimately building resilience. And when we're talking about adaptive capacity, especially within climate change, we're looking at how individuals, households, communities, as well as systems can adjust to, manage, or cope with the impacts of climate change. So ideally and essentially, the productive use of energy within climate adaptation works as a catalyst to strengthen resilience, with these households, communities, and enterprises gaining access to reliable as well as affordable energy sources for productive activities, diversifying incomes, promoting alternative livelihoods, as well as improving resource efficiency. And I think we've been able to see a number of these examples within our day-to-day lives, perhaps mainly in the agricultural sector, as Engineer Mutazu mentioned. We have a number of projects and interventions that we're currently implementing through the Ministry of Agriculture and Lands, focusing on agriculture and agro-processing resilience, where we're shifting from climate vulnerable grid power to solar powered irrigation, for example, as well as establishing cold storage systems within rural communities, as well as reducing crop losses to the droughts and climate and weather-related shocks that we experience in Zimbabwe. And one such example is the Climate Adaptation, Water and Energy Infrastructure Program, where we have been able to electrify the Hakwata village with a 200 kilowatt per hour mini grid, as well as solar-powered piped water irrigation systems, which has not only seen increase in crop yields, but also improved access to clean as well as potable water for irrigation purposes, also leading to the reduction in waterborne diseases. So going beyond climate adaptation, we start to see the knock-on effects of some of these productive use of energies across various sustainable development goals, as well as various other sectors. Within Zimbabwe, and within the climate change space, we have tried to incorporate productive use energy activities within our national policy framework, as well as regulatory frameworks, where we've highlighted some of these interventions in our National Climate Change Adaptation Plan, which we launched in 2024. We've also developed a climate smart agriculture manual, which essentially highlights how we can integrate productive use of energy, not just within agriculture, but also horticulture and so forth. With regards to how productive use of energy can be used within gender inclusivity, this essentially looks at energy-enabled productivity, reducing time burdens for women and the girl child, and expanding economic participation, and improving the safety for women and the girl child, who often bear the disproportionate negative impacts of energy poverty. So just to provide a snapshot or some tangible examples, we have under the same project, the Kawek project, where we electrified Hakwata, we've seen that this has allowed for the girl child to study into the evening, and where more time has been allocated, less time is being allocated to looking for firewood and cooking and so forth. More time is being allocated to alternative livelihoods, caregiving, more time on studying, and this has actually seen an increase in the pass rates within the village. There's also scope for increased health, safety, and mobility, where women and children and the girl child have safer lighting, which also reduces gender-based risks within the markets, schools, as well as travel across various regions. And then another example, another tangible example that we have is under the UN SDG Fund project entitled Catalyzing Investments in Renewable Energy for the Acceleration of the Attainment of the SDGs in Zimbabwe, which is a partnership between the UN as well as the government of Zimbabwe and Old Mutual, where we've been able to create a renewable energy fund to the tune of 40 million, looking at investment in inclusive, gender responsive, as well as climate impactful projects. And within this project, we will see the electrification of the enhancement of the Guruve Solar Park, which will benefit not only the girl child and women, but also local clinics, as well as primary schools, as well as promoting the creation of jobs. So maybe I'll stop there for now.
Can you just have your mic? Thank you. Thank you very much. And standing by the protocols already set, I would just like to continue now with this theme. So when we talk about gender inclusion, in many cases it's also a barrier related to finance. And so I think it would be very apt that we ask Felistas to talk to us about the Rural Electrification Fund, but particularly which productive use of energy solutions have proven most effective in accelerating rural and peri-urban programs towards universal access? And over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the question. Let me write on the protocol previously observed. Talking to productive use of energy that has been most effective in the rural areas and peri-urban, and with particular reference to universal access. Here in Zimbabwe, we are actually moving towards universal access through the renewable energy. That's when we are constructing the community solar mini-grids, institutional solar microgrids, and we are also extending grids. And I'm sure we all agree that productive use of energy is about sustainability of these electrification programs. So the most effective, I'm going to be outlining and talking more to those productive use of energy solutions that have proved to be most effective here in Zimbabwe, with particular reference to rural and peri-urban. The first one I'm going to talk about is electricity or solar-powered irrigation systems to address the food security, as has been alluded to by the two previous speakers earlier on. This has become one of the most effective productive use of energy here in Zimbabwe, where the small-scale farmers are empowered or are enabled to grow crops all year round without depending or relying on rain-fed seasons. Because they have this flexibility of irrigation, they grow crops, commercial crops, and all year round, which then translates to inflows to the farmers, inflows to the cooperatives, and to the small, medium enterprises. And when they get inflows, it means they have the capacity now to pay for the electricity that is being used. Hence the sustainability of the solar plant in the case of solar projects, sustainability of the energy infrastructure in the case of grid electricity. And when they get the capacity to pay, it means continuity. It also impacts on the livelihoods because disposable incomes improve of all those involved in those irrigated farming schemes. So by that, it brings sustainability of the whole community of the project, and this has been one of the most effective. We have several irrigation schemes under solar, like the Hakwata that has been mentioned by Munashe. We have the Mashava solar irrigation scheme. We have the Bemba solar irrigation scheme. These are all community schemes that are irrigating through solar. Then under grid, we have so many with over hundreds and hundreds of hectares under irrigation, with the recent one that we electrified being the Romsley in Makoni district of Manicaland province. They have over 50 hectares under irrigation. And this has become one of the most effective productive use of energy that we have here in Zimbabwe. The next one being rural industrialization, where as a country we are moving towards, we are driving the rural industrialization agenda towards upper middle income society by 2030. So upper middle income society can only be achieved through improved incomes for all the citizens of Zimbabwe. Hence the drive for rural industrialization. And we have found this to become one of the most effective productive use of energy. And we are driving it through village business units that have been explained earlier on, whereby once we electrify an area, villagers will then get together, pool resources, and identify a business venture besides the agriculture one, identify a business venture that they can run with to generate income for themselves, to develop themselves and their areas. We also have school business units whereby we electrify a school. Besides using the power for computers and lighting, charging phones, schools are now engaging into business activities. School business units are also engaging into business activities for income generation for the school. And you'll find that through those productive use of energy, the energy is put to good use. Everyone gets capacity to pay for the energy provided, and the lives improve. So we electrify the schools, the clinics, as part of the anchor loads, especially where we construct community solar mini grids. The anchor loads are from the school, the clinics, and the business center. So when the school engages into, it starts their school business unit, it means that's productive use. The staff housing, obviously those wants to live like their counterparts in urban areas, the moment they get electricity, they utilize it for domestic use. Then we have the business centers. Without electricity, there is so much restriction in terms of what can be done at a business center, including selling cold beverages. They cannot without electricity, without energy. But once we electrify, you would find the business shops engaging in refrigeration, into introducing butcheries, introducing so many other forms of business. And for the village business units, for the small enterprises, for the cooperatives, the most common businesses that are being undertaken for productive use starts with welding, whereby those who group together get training and capacitation. They start a welding business, welding door frames, doors, steel doors, burglar bars, and for their local markets, we all know that these are items that everyone would want to buy. And where there is no local supply, it means it's a long journey to go and buy a door frame because you are building your house in the rural areas. So they start producing those, and they have red markets. When they have excess, they then travel to larger markets for sales. They also introduce carpentry businesses, carpentry for doors, beds, wardrobes in the rural areas. Then refrigeration, like the bottle stores, the butchery shops, and the selling of cold beverages. They establish hair salons, beauty bars, and establish clothing factories where we have tailors, but they did not have electricity, hence nothing was taking place. They established a shop, start manufacturing clothes, and where this has started, they've started with school uniforms for all the schools in their district. And you would find that it becomes easier for parents to obtain schools close by their homes. So this has become very effective in the sense that the energy provided promotes productivity. And that productivity creates capacity to pay for the electricity and sustainability. Employment creation is embedded. Our youth, our women, and men in the rural areas and peri-urban get employed right there at their homes, in their community. And the income generated increase the disposal incomes at a community level and at an individual capacity. You see lives improving. People start building, constructing better housing, people wearing quality clothes. You actually see it when you visit a community, especially the Akwata that has been mentioned. That life here has changed. Where longer distances are involved for traveling, you see people migrating from bicycles to motorcycles, which is a sign of improved income levels in a community. So as a productive use of energy, rural industrialization has been very effective here in Zimbabwe. But for the rural industrialization, we have realized that it can only happen with capacitation, whereby people has to be capacitated. First, they have to be capacitated mentally and enlightening people as to possibilities of using electricity, so that they don't just see it as electricity for lighting and charging their phones, giving them possibilities, ideas of what they can do with the electricity that has been provided to them. trying to shift their mindset from the mindset of consumption to a business-minded community who then see electricity as an enabler and chance and opportunity for life transformation. Once that stage is passed, people need then to be capacitated into the lines of business they have chosen. Those who want to be welders, they are availed training, vocational skills training, to equip them to actually run that business with the right skills. Then from there, they need to be capacitated financially with capital, in which they can form into groups. Then they are funded in turns through a revolving fund. Everyone will be keen to repay so that the next person also access it and starts their own business. So with that capacitation, 3-tier capacitation of beneficiaries of electricity, we have found rural industrialization is one of the most effective productive use of energy. Then we also have refrigeration, where we have solar cold storage, cold rooms, freezers, and chillers. These are mainly in the farms for storing perishable products like fruits and vegetables, milk and fish from the farming activities. They need storage so that they are able to store these, extend the shelf life of their products, and being able to negotiate at the market. Actually, we have realized that the storage empowers a farmer or an SME with bargaining power at the market. Where you are selling something highly perishable, you do not have storage for it, buyers will dictate the pace. They will dictate the price at which they want to get your products. But with storage, farmers are dictating the price because they know if you don't get it, I will still store it for the next 2 weeks and I will get a buyer. It actually enables them to sell their products where the prices are good for them. And it also enables value chain for the dairy, for the fruit aggregators. Then the peri-urban distributors all benefit from the availability of storage capacity as a productive energy use. Then we have electric agro-processing mills. We are talking of our mills, the grinding mills, oil pressing, threshing equipment, driving productive use of energy at household level, at community level, and even our small to medium enterprises. You find peanut butter that was made at Nembudzia Growth Point down there in Midlands being sold in Pick and Pay supermarkets. That's empowerment, and that's coming through productive use of energy because they have electricity, they have this machinery, this equipment. They are now adding value to their groundnuts. Prior to that, they could only sell groundnuts, but they are now adding value to the groundnuts and selling well-packed peanut butter, well-packed cooking oil. And this has also become one of the most effective productive use of energy. By creating local enterprises, it's reducing drudgery, especially for women who traditionally shoulder the manual tasks. It's reducing process throughput from hours to minutes, and it's improving the quality and consistency of the outputs and keeping the value locally by empowering those involved in that. We have solar dryers for crops and fish and other meats, solar heated drying chambers to process grains, to process fruits, to process meat safely here in Zimbabwe. This is one of the productive use of energy that is upcoming, and we are about to commission a Mopani solar worm dryer in Gwanda in Matabeleland South. This is a project that is it's a project that has been undertaken to promote productive use of energy, but in the process adding value to locally availed fruits, meat, and grains. So we have all these as productive use of energy that have been very effective in rural areas and peri-urban. And They've been effective because they reduce barriers, they boost earnings and productivity. Users see tangible return on investment and through the productivity gains. They are easy to operate and maintain locally. They support multiple income streams for the beneficiaries. They are scalable and replicable elsewhere. If people see it in Mad South, they can replicate it in Masvingo. It can be replicated in Manicaland. And there we go towards universal access. And the economies are actually empowered. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think another round of applause would do very well. One of the terms that I picked up was rural industrialization, because traditionally we talk about productive use of energy. And with that also came the phrase, and I hope I'm doing justice to what was just said, they can identify a business activity for income generation. And with that, what came to mind was the further issue of funding. And so, Wally, I'd like to ask you this question. From a private sector viewpoint, which financing and business models best support productive use of energy adoption amongst low-income and rural customers? And with that, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Doing a swell job, despite being, can't say anybody's name properly, but we forgive you, honorary Jamaican. I stand on existing protocols, recognize the presence of honorable ministers and distinguished guests here. My name is Wale Aboyade. I work for a company called Sun King. Sun King is one of the largest off-grid solar providers on the continent. It's a global company, so we have operations here in Africa, 12 different countries, as well as in Asia. But before I talk a little bit more to your question, I first of all need to thank our host and the government of Zimbabwe. For one thing, my entry into Zimbabwe this time was, the most seamless it has been. I'm Nigerian, as maybe some of you can tell from my accent and my name. And the last time I was here, I don't know, maybe about 5-6 years ago, I had like 6 different officials examine my passport. Like, what is this one coming to do here? This time, I just went straight through. I was like, yes, progress in Africa in terms of freedom of movement and all that. So I appreciate that. But I wanted to also apologize for my voice. I'm not trying to put on a bedroom voice intentionally. I just have a bit of a cold, but it will get better. But I hope you can hear me clearly. So, we said I really love to be able to dig into this. We've heard already how important productive use of energy is for income generation, for basically economic transformation. And if you think about it, people say energy is what makes the world go round, is what drives the economy. So the whole point of energy, or I would say the major point of energy, is productive use, is to be able to produce things to actually keep the economy going. So that's clear. But the key question that I'd like to really think about and reflect on together with you all from a private sector perspective is, how do you actually make this happen at scale and in the timelines that we're all setting for ourselves? We have the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, SDG 7. We have Mission 300 as well for SDG 7. So how do we accomplish this really important thing in such a short time? And to get there, I just reflect on, traditionally, how has productive use been powered in the places where we see it? Most good examples of productive use has been mostly in urban areas and not industrial areas, and where you build supply of energy, especially where in an urban area, and then there's existing demand, and the demand rises. So there's this concept of build it and they will come, right? You build a big power plant, you supply the city, and as long as there's enough electricity, there's enough entrepreneurial activity and finance flows and all of that to increase the demand. Oh, my voice is not carrying through. This bedroom voice of a thing is a real issue. So, again, as I was saying, traditionally, you just build this big power plant, supply it to big urban centers, and productive activity happens. And that's great for urban areas and for areas, again, with those other factors of production around, where you're really supplying the electricity. But when you now start to think of rural and urban areas, we see that that model doesn't work as much. Across Africa and across the developing world, we see multiple examples of the grid being available in rural areas, but massive underutilization in terms of productive use. You're not necessarily seeing a commensurate level of, industrial activity happening in rural areas that already are connected to the grid. So it's not necessarily, again, the build it and they'll come approach really does not work when it comes to rural and poorer communities. You have to think about it differently. And the reason this is important is that the cost of actually extending and building out these grids to far-off communities is really expensive. And so the more we do that, and we're not able to stimulate economic development, what actually happens is the whole energy sector actually gets depressed because these things cost a lot, but you can't recover that money because demand stays low. You spend millions of dollars to extend the grid to a community, but their demand is still basically household level and really small-scale agriculture. It's still some lighting, some TVs, and a few small-scale things like we've just heard. Now, does that kind of activity pay for the cost of extending the grids to these rural areas? Usually not. So if we want to be able to scale under a condition where most countries are fiscally constrained, what models should we really be using and thinking about for rural areas? And I'd like to offer that the off-grid model, especially off-grid distributed solar, offers some real strong lessons that we can apply here for really scaling productive use of energy in rural areas. And again, one of the reasons it can do this is because we've seen that off-grid has been able to successfully scale in rural areas. Sun King, for example, as I was saying, we're one of the largest on the continent. We exist in 12 African countries, about 4 of them in the Sadc area. We're in Zambia, in Malawi, in Tanzania, in Mozambique. And there, collectively, we supply around 80,000 kits every month to households and businesses. So if you look at those numbers, compared to the numbers that we actually need to reach to electrify everyone, it's not bad. It's a pretty significant chunk there, where we've been able to, again, using our off-grid model, basically based on a pay-as-you-go mechanism, we're reaching so many people right now. And this number is only increasing. Across the rest of Africa, we're doing about 400 to 450,000 systems every month. Most of these numbers are in East and West Africa. Southern Africa, like I said, is just over 100,000, less than a quarter of this, but we hope to see that increase over time. So we know that rural off-grid and standalone solar can work to supply basic energy needs in the most rural areas. So how can we draw on those lessons of that success to be able to expand on productive use? So there, I think I'm just going to mention a few points. One of the things is, let me just look at my notes again here. One of the things that the off-grid sector does very well is matching demand or supply with actual demand. Now, if you remember what I said about the grid, usually you just extend the grid and demand usually just still stays low. We don't necessarily see a drastic increase in demand because people have the grid connected to them. And that is done at great expense. But what if you can supply many of these communities at much, much, much lower cost? Usually we're talking about 1/10 of the cost to meet their existing demand, but you now are able to grow that supply as their demand grows. So that way, it's not a stranded asset issue. You have not over-invested where you're not able to make the returns. And that's what off-grid solar is able to do. You can look at the community and see what their demand is right now and build out and supply off-grid solar systems to them to meet their existing demand. But as their demand increases, as they do more irrigation, as they do more agro-processing, as they do more cooling, you can then continue to scale the solar again at an increasingly cheaper cost, because we all know how the trends in solar is going down. So that ability to match demand, supply and demand is, I think, a unique thing that distributed solar is able to do that can actually help build out and scale productive use systems that connect to the systems, right? So you don't have to wait until the grid arrives to a particular community. You can already start to think about what productive use systems they need, what cooling, what milling, what irrigation needs, and start to supply that at the level of production that they currently have, using, again, this model of scaling as you go and building modular systems. The second big point about a lesson that I'll take from our sector into productive use is on how we've been able to crack the issue of affordability. When the off-grid solar system really took off 10, 15 years ago, these systems are way more expensive then, and most people couldn't afford them. And that's actually still true today, even though the cost, as many of you will know, of solar has dropped by over 90%. It's still, the upfront cost can still be formidable to many, especially low-income earners. But what the distributed solar system industry has been able to do, including ourselves, is to really scale this pay-as-you-go model, where people don't have to pay upfront for the systems. They only pay a small deposit, sometimes between 10 to 20% of the cost of the system, and then they pay gradually over time as they use the systems, and they usually then it's really a pay-to-own model. They pay over 12 months or 18 months, as you know, depending on their pocket, and eventually they own the systems and they can use it for 5 to sometimes even 10 years. Now, if you think about, again, the productive use equipment, many of them are also expensive upfront. The irrigation pumps, expensive upfront. The processing mills are expensive upfront. Many of these large cooling devices for agriculture are expensive upfront. But if you adopt this model where people can pay gradually, it works. The other key point about the pay-as-you-go model is we're actually giving financing to people who would normally be able to access traditional credit or bank loans. Over 90% of our customers will never have been able to access bank loans. We don't ask for collateral, we only ask for your ID. That's all you need to be able to access a solar home system, a Sun King solar home system, because we use the system itself as collateral. You buy the system and you continue to pay as you use. And our default rates are incredible. On average across Africa, 80% of people pay the value of the systems within the lifetime of their contract. 70% pays within 2x, like 2 times the lifetime of the contract. So people are actually paying this without all these long forms you have to fill in the bank and asking for security, asking for collateral, asking for a pint of your blood. None of that is actually happening in the pay-go sector. So people who would never have been able to access credit are accessing credit, and again, at a really high rate. And the same can happen for productive use equipment. Farmers will, again, working with, and none of this would work without government support, by the way, and I'll come to that last. But farmers, processors, welders should be able to access this equipment through this similar pay-as-you-go mechanisms. The last point I'll make again, there's some shared interest here in this, is the operational efficiency of the off-grid solar industry. The off-grid solar industry is an interesting one. I come from a background, like I think many of you here, energy engineering background, working on the grid, on generation, transmission, distribution, basically from an infrastructure perspective. But the off-grid solar industry, we come from a solar product perspective, where the solar systems and inverters are actually dealt as product that needs to be moved to a client. And so the operational ability to be able to deliver a solar system to a household or to a business or to a farmer is much quicker because it's a product, not infrastructure. If you know, many of you, again, like me, will know how long it takes to build out infrastructure to connect to a village. Just the planning alone will take 2 years. The actual thing could take 10 years. Planning will take 2 years. The financing could take 5 if you're lucky, and let alone all the other stuff that needs to go. But when you are dealing with a standalone system, you can install it, first of all, in less than a day, and you can also arrange all the upfront work we've seen in months rather than years. And so the whole business model of a product focus where you're able to sort of get this equipment to individuals through a supply chain that looks very much like fast-moving consumer products, I think brings in this added dimension towards the energy sector that many of us traditionally are not used to. We're used to thinking of energy supply as infrastructure, but thinking of energy supply as a product brings a whole different level of speed. And that speed, again, is actually, and that whole model is actually more amenable to productive use equipment because these are usually standalone equipment. The mills, the cooling devices, the irrigation pumps, many of these take the form of standalone devices that can be moved through the operational system that we already have built, for example, as a product company. And so I think that a lot more can be done. And we are, after looking at all these things, personally as Sun King, we have actually started to think about how we can build on and start to supply more productive use equipment on the back of our, again, operational network and infrastructure for solar. So increasingly, we recently actually launched a freezer line for mostly commercial customers, mostly in Nigeria and Kenya right now, where a lot of our customers who buy solar can also then, using the same payment infrastructure on the pay-as-you-go model, also acquire freezers for their shops and for their businesses. We are also looking into partnering with companies that make solar mills, companies that do irrigation pumps, so that we can also deliver this equipment, again, on the back of the system we have built to be able to get solar to people everywhere. So I'll just rest it there as some of the points that I think in which we can address this issue of financing for productive use. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Wal. For some reason, okay. Thanks for that. I think I'm now finding myself having a non-productive use moment in the sense that I'm time constrained. So, Helen, if we can, just following on that, if you could just give us some of the wider regional experiences. I do know that Wally spoke a lot about what happened in Nigeria, Tanzania, and so forth, so that is still wide, but I'd love to hear your aspect on this. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I'll start by saying, to add to what Wale has said, firstly, energy alone, as we have heard from this morning and yesterday, it creates potential. So when you're talking about productive use of energy, it's identifying that energy is an impetus to a growth in the economic value of communities. As Ignite, our focus is largely towards rural electrification. And with my experience in the southern region, what we've identified is, firstly, there are 3 characteristics that define what kind of productive use equipment we could deploy in these areas, and at the end of it, see a growth in the value chains in those communities. So a lot of them were spoken to by Madam Felicitas, but I'll start by speaking to the characteristics. So, like I have said, energy is supposed to create potential, and that potential is supposed to evolve into value for the communities. So firstly, for the choice of PUE solutions that is going to add value, you have to look at how it aligns with the agriculture value chains. So you probably all agree with me that the value chains in most of the southern countries are very similar. We were joking earlier today with a colleague of mine that we're not sure who drew the lines. Because when I'm sitting here and I'm Zambian, when I go outside, it looks like I'm at home. Because everybody else, except a slight hint in the accent, the culture, the way they speak, how they carry themselves is very similar to us in Zambia. You cross over to Namibia, you cross over to Zimbabwe, to Botswana, it's very similar. And you realize that our staple foods are also very similar. So when you cross across the different borders, you realize that the agricultural value chains are the same. A lot of us have tested Sadc, we've tested Shima, whatever name it's called. In the southern region, you find that in the rural areas, they'll grow maize, and beyond growing maize, they want to grow some groundnuts, but all those things need to be shelled, they need to be milled, and there will be the output. So you have to start with a productive use of energy equipment that is going to tap into that, firstly. Secondly is to ensure that it delivers quick financial returns. So you don't want to go and install a machine just because it's a PUE. You take it in a community that is not going to add value. So on top of it adding value, it has to bring quick returns. To speak to what Wale said, a lot of us, when we're deploying the machines in the communities, you want to simplify the process, right? And you also want to make it affordable. So for the person who maybe makes fritters and they want to pay $3, for example, just to use a very simple example, they're paying $3 every day, and they have a machine that generates, say, $50 monthly. It will not add value. So you want to have something that will deliver quick returns. And then also, if we're looking at the technology of mini-grids, you want to match the daytime generation profile of solar. So you know that the welding that was spoken about, the groundnut shelling, the maize milling, the oil expelling, all that is done during the day. So you want to optimize that use while there's sunlight, and then you have lesser capex investment for battery storage on a mini grid. To speak to some of the examples, I know a lot of them were mentioned earlier, but one of the key ones that we are now looking into and deploying into the southern region, example would be your three-wheelers, e-mobility. So there's always need to move. One of the things that we've discussed earlier is the fact that, so if I have excess and I want to take it to the district or to the boma or to the town, I need to move from one place to the other. Ideally, you would use an ordinary bicycle, but there's an opportunity to actually use a mini grid to recharge batteries. So if you have a bicycle, for example, a Buffalo bicycle that has interchangeable batteries, it means that someone can run a business where they're renting out bikes, and the next day the person will come and get a different battery. That is also productive use of equipment. The other one that we're looking at is the same concept but on three-wheelers. So you find that if the terrain is good, someone is going to ask for an opportunity to have something that will carry just slightly more, but it has to be a lot more resilient depending on what the terrain is in that area. The other thing that I would like to highlight, maybe that wasn't discussed a lot, is the opportunity of larger options of cold storage. So you have your simple deep freezers, your fridges, because it will cost a lot more and it will add more value to sell a frozen Coca-Cola. And we all know that a Coca-Cola in a bottle tastes better if it's cold and chilly as opposed to it being warm. So I can sell it for a few more cents on top of it. But the other option that we're now looking into is partnering with meat processing companies. Can we build at our mini-grid sites refrigeration opportunities that we can rent out to different communities? So there's a wide array of opportunities, but I'll still end by saying it's the three things that need to look at, which is basically, are they adding value? Are we aligning to the value chain? And we shouldn't just restrict ourselves to the agricultural value chain. We should go beyond that, but at the end of it all, it should add value to the growth and economy of the communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think at this point, very quickly, I'll just hand over to Dina for you to give us Madagascar's experience. We all know that, as the Americans would say, they're over the other side of the pond. So with that, Dina, please.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Dina Rassaf-Machach. I'm from Madagascar. I work at the Ministry of Energy and Hydrocarbons as Director of Energy Development. The question for me is like what about the use of energy, renewable energy, most of all, in to be productive. In Madagascar, we have a big challenge is to, firstly, for the access to electricity. Mean to say that actually we are at 36% of electricity rate as access, and in the rural area, this rate is around 16.16. So first of activities that promoters and the developers do in the rural area is mostly for lighting. But let's say since the couple of years, let's say 5 years ago, we are like pushing them to promote as well the growth. Mean to say that they have to put in place activities that give this that add value, as my predecessor says. So what is the most activities that they use in rural area is like exactly what my lady from the rural area rural electrification fund says before me. All these activities on the creating industries, creating the add value for raw materials from farmers. And actually, we talk about also the pumping solar. So those activities are, let's say, at their beginning. We have we have those promoters who must put in place these activities to make sure to have their return. Because if they use only put in place a power plant, solar power plant or hydro power plant, and just for lighting, they will not meet their cost. So they are like, they run to the bankrupt if they don't put in place a productive use of electricity. So that is activities that we must do, and that will help us also to have this economic growth in rural area, as well as these are the parts who are very poor in Madagascar as well. So the activities are for, let's say, for the fishing and also for transforming the agricultural product. And one activities that I can say it's special for Madagascar is like those developers, because of every houses in rural area are very far from each other, and so putting in place grid is very, very expensive. So what they do in the rural area as a productive use, among what you told before, is like they are like renting light. So people put it in the morning, and the developer charge it, and at the beginning of night they take it again to their house and light in their house. And for the developer, it gives a value, it gives money for them, it gives like production, and that is their business, if you can say it like that. So it's because of the situation in Madagascar, where the houses are very far from grid, very far from each other, and that is activities that I think are very special in our situation. So for that, the government put in place all the all the framework, and we put also incentives on taxes and duties, so to help the promoters to meet their needs. So because we have to import all of equipment for the renewable energy, so tax and VAT and also duties are facilitated in Madagascar. What we do also as a government is like to push. Actually, we are moving also for the clean cooking solution. So the renewable energy will procure also energy for the clean cooking. We know all what are the positive impacts that we can have with pushing clean cooking in Madagascar. Actually, we can say that more than 90% of households rely on wood fuel for the cooking, and for us, using also the clean cooking is amongst the productive use of energy, because it will create enterprises to create the cook stove. It will also consume more energy than only for lighting, and that will give also to promoters for their project to be bankable. So to share what is activities that we can share under countries under Sadc, I think that Madagascar is more to take experiences from others than to give, because we are at our very first, at the very beginning of the activities. We put this, the share and the use and the promotion of the productive use of energy on our energy compact. So we have to realize a big result by 2030 under of the mission 300. So I'm happy to hear from all of you, and we try to make something move in Madagascar, and also we are open to receive the experience and the success stories from each one of you, and we continue also to promote and to do our little way in our country. So thank you so much.
Dina, thank you very, very much. A big round of applause for everyone here, please. Okay, because time is not my friend, I will just wrap up very quickly, and I'll say the following on behalf of all the participants. It is clear that productive use of energy means rural industrialization, and I do know the word urban was used, and I do know that is also something else. But one of the things that comes forward is that economies of scale is critical, and there are three key pillars. First one is people. So the next one is, God, are you guys hungry? Food. And the last one, of course, is energy, to ensure that we can do that. With that, a great round of applause for everybody. Thank you very much. You've been a lovely set of people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we're going to have a group picture. So if the photographers would like to come up, and ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to, please stand on stage, and we'll have a very quick group picture. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been amazing, so we are going to give you a -20-minute tea break. Okay, 20 minutes. At 15:35, we will resume for the final session of the day. And that session will speak to empowering gender and youth in energy transition. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you in 15 minutes.